we've seen significant changes in what COVID-19 means for the country. Every day, we've had new updates for Canadians. We
introduced new travel restrictions to slow down the progression of the disease. For example, we are limiting non-essential travel at the U.S.-Canada border. We have invested in health and research. We unveiled an unprecedented economic plan.
That's how we will protect Canadians and the economy. I know it's also a lot to take in. People are having to figure out how they can work from home or close up shop temporarily. Parents are trying to explain to their kids what's going on and why school is canceled. Right now, the last thing anyone needs is to be worrying about how to make ends meet. People need to know they have support for their jobs, their businesses, their industries. And that's what our government has been focused on since day one. Yesterday, we announced an $82 billion plan that will support all Canadians. This includes a whole range of measures. And people should be checking canada.ca for the latest information. Our team is hard at work with the public service in making sure these new supports get to Canadians as quickly as possible. They're doing a fantastic job already. And I'll have a long discussion with the Clerk of the Privy Council later today to talk about how we can support our public servants and ensure that Canadians can access these new programs. But the bottom line is this: we're giving you more help when you need it. If you're a parent, we're here for you, just like for the single mom of two who will get nearly $1,500 by the end of May because of the increase in the Canada Child Benefit and the GST credit. If you're worried about making ends meet, we've got your back. Just like for the family that was concerned about their mortgage and now doesn't have to make payments for the next 6 months. And if you're helping others, we're standing with you. Like with the Samaritan House in Brandon, Manitoba, that on Wednesday was able to open and deal with COVID-19 thanks to new funding. They were worried because their clients had nowhere to go since everything else closed. But now, with the new support, they can stagger entry to 10 people at a time, extend hours, and stock up the food bank.
We're going through a difficult time, but we will come through this together. Whether you need more time to pay back a student loan or whether you're a farmer who's worried about his income, we are there for you. And we will continue to do everything we can to help you.
On health, we're continuing to pull out all the stops to keep you safe. We're moving forward on vital research for everything from better understanding how this virus spreads to developing vaccines and treatments. As part of the $1 billion fund I announced earlier this month, $25 million will directly support 49 researchers and their teams across the country. Their work is focused on developing and implementing measures to detect, manage, and reduce the spread of COVID-19. Across the country, scientists and researchers are working extremely hard. I want to take a moment to specifically thank them for all the essential work they're doing. At the same time, we will expedite access to COVID-19 lab test kits and other medical devices. The reality is that the need for these test kits is growing. Yesterday, Dr. Tam said that officials have now tested more than 50,000 Canadians since the beginning of the outbreak. 25,000 of those were done just in the last week alone. So while we ramp up, we're making sure Canada is ready to keep up. Ministers Haidu and Minister Freeland will continue working with the provinces and territories so that everyone has the resources they need. In times of crisis, Canadians come together. We've heard from businesses from coast to coast to coast who are telling us they want to help. Soon, I'll have more to say about procurement and how industry can help with this effort. But until then, I want to let people know that we are working tirelessly to keep our hospitals, healthcare system, and Canadians supported. On that note, let me take a moment to recognize again the incredible work of our nurses, doctors, technicians, and other healthcare professionals. They are on the front lines of this, and they're doing a remarkable job. We need to support them and keep them healthy as well. But even if you don't work in a hospital, you can still keep people healthy. For example, we still need blood donors. So if you're able, consider going in and donating. Book an appointment online through blood.ca or by calling 1-888-236-6283. On a encore besoin de donneurs de
We
sang.
still need blood donors. If you are able to make a donation, we encourage you to do so. To make an appointment, you can look at the site or call 1-888-236-6283. We are also looking for other ways to help Canadians abroad. Earlier, I spoke with President Zelensky of Ukraine about this situation, how we can coordinate our work. I also talked to Premier Löfven of Sweden. Now, earlier this week, we announced a new fund to help people to receive up to $5,000 to return to the country or meet their needs in the meantime. We are also working with businesses and telecommunications organizations. They have agreed to send a text message to Canadians abroad about the consular services available. Ministers Baines and Champagne are working with their partners to put this in place, and we will continue to ensure that people receive all the necessary information. There is a lot of misinformation circulating, and we want to ensure that people know how to obtain help. I want to remind you that Canadians can come back to Canada and that they should do that. And all of those having trouble coming back, well, I can tell you we are working hard to resolve that situation. In fact, I talked to the leaders of WestJet and Air Canada about this very situation yesterday afternoon.
And weeks ahead hold. But there's no doubt these are uncertain times. But no matter what happens next, we can count on each other. So keep supporting your neighbors by picking up some groceries for them if you're already at the store. Check in with people on the front lines like cashiers and truckers, pharmacists and hospital staff. Take the right steps like staying home and working remotely to help flatten the curve. And as you do, know that your government is right there with you. We're working to slow the spread of this virus. We're taking steps to support you through tough times. There is nothing we won't do to keep you safe and to protect your health. Thank you. Merci tout le monde. I'm now happy to take your questions.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. Yesterday, Premier Kenney in Alberta estimated that it won't be till May or June that social distancing measures will be lifted. How long do you think social distancing and having people work from home will be in place for?
We are going to continue to follow the best recommendations of experts. We've heard anything from weeks to months. We know this is a difficult and extraordinary time in which Canadians are taking difficult and extraordinary measures, and we will continue to do that until Canadians are safe.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Raymond Fillon de TVA. Deux questions.
TVA, two questions. Border closures between the U.S. And Canada. Do you know exactly when that will come into effect? And your government has said several times in recent weeks that this will go on longer before it stops. So what is the worst possible scenario? First of all, with respect to the U.S.-Canada border, we are working together to try and finalize the details with our American counterparts, and we expect these measures to go into effect probably in the night of Friday to Saturday, so in a day and a half. Now, with respect to the various scenarios out there, we are aware of a variety of possible scenarios, and what we're doing with respect to the social distancing and closing shops, well, we believe all of this will keep Canadians safer, and we will continue to be ready for any eventuality.
We are continuing to work on the fine-tuning of the agreement between Canada and the United States. I think it's almost there. My understanding is that the measures will probably come into place in the night between Friday and Saturday, so in about a day and a half.
Spanovich, CBC News. Prime Minister, President Donald Trump yesterday signed the Defense Production Act, which would allow the U.S. military to help in the production of personal protective equipment such as masks. And the Italian military is also helping to produce ventilators. Canada has its own Defense Production Act with similar powers. So are you considering using them, and under what kind of circumstances?
Yes, we are considering using any measures necessary to ensure that Canadians and our healthcare systems have the supports they need. We've already been engaged with industry on production and ramping up capacity to build and create more equipment. We will, of course, look at military procurement as a solution as well. There's a range of things that we can do, and we will do what is necessary. Okay.
Yes, we are looking at all the possible measures that could be necessary to ensure that the equipment people need is available. We have already talked to many different manufacturers about the needs of our healthcare system and what they can do to help, but we will also be looking at other options, and that could include the military's participation. Mr. Trudeau, with respect to the airlifts decided on by Mr. Champagne, do you think that there are certain countries that are determined on a priority basis? And will you repatriate the people on the ship in Marseille? Well, we are receiving an enormous number of requests from all around the world. Canadians did receive a text message. Canadians abroad did receive that message, and which told them who to contact if they need assistance. As I said, I also talked to the CEOs of WestJet and Air Canada last night, and we pointed out to them that we need to work together to try and repatriate as many Canadians as possible on an emergency basis. With respect to the cruise ship, I have no information at this time.
As we've said, we're going to work very, very hard to bring Canadians home. It's time for Canadians to come home from around the world. We recognize that will be a challenge. That's why we sent out a text message to all Canadians overseas with information on how to share their situation and get in touch with consular services. I spoke yesterday with the heads of our two large airlines, WestJet and Air Canada, to talk about how we can work with them to ensure that there are flights to bring Canadians home. We will continue to respond to the overwhelming demand by Canadians for support. We will be there to help them and get home as many people as we possibly can in the coming days and week. On the cruise ship in question, I don't have any specific information on that, but I'm sure there'll be further updates at noon on the regular press conference.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. What is your thinking about using the Emergency Measures Act, and how would that work? Would you need the approval of the provinces or of Parliament? And this is an option in terms of restricting movement between the provinces. Well, as I said, we will be looking at everything that can be done. We are not ruling anything out in terms of the options that we may want to rely on. At the same time, we do recognize that the Emergency Measures Act is an extreme law with certain implications that would also require us to bring back the House of Commons to pass these measures. So it is a major tool, and I can tell you that right now we already have a lot of tools that allow us to do what we need to do. If there are other steps that need to be accomplished and can only be accomplished through invoking the Emergency Measures Act, then we will do so.
Prime Minister Jamie Pashagumska, PTN National News. Yesterday, you mentioned $305 million that would go to Indigenous communities to help with this pandemic. You mentioned a distinctions-based approach. Could you explain what that means for First Nations, status, non-status, Inuit, and Métis Nation communities?
We are going to be sending money to Indigenous communities for them to use the way they need to keep their communities safe through COVID-19 and support access to supplies they need and get through this difficult situation. We recognize recognize that Indigenous Canadians are faced with greater health vulnerabilities and greater economic challenges than most Canadians at the best of times. There is a need for special support and special care for Indigenous communities and Indigenous Canadians right across the country. Minister Miller of Indigenous Services will be part of the press conference today at noon to answer more questions and to talk about specifically what we're doing with Indigenous Canadians.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Nick Taylor-Lazy from Maclean's. On small businesses who've had to shut their doors already and have zero revenue coming in, say that the help that was promised yesterday, won't help them if it doesn't get there in time before they go bankrupt. What about immediate payroll support?
We have made credit a lot easier to access for businesses of all sizes right now. Those were moves we made last week to ensure that there are loans, there is bridging financing available for businesses large and small. We've also taken specific measures on payroll support for small businesses that will be available in the near future. The help for Canadians will be flowing in the coming weeks. We recognize that this is a difficult time, both in terms of getting these new programs in place quickly enough to help Canadians, and that is why I'm going to be working with the public service to ensure that all our efforts are focused on supporting Canadians through this difficult time.
We recognize that small businesses are facing special challenges, and that's why we announced measures yesterday to help them. At the same time, we had announced access to credit last week, a credit facility to help those businesses that are going through tough times right now. And also help for Canadians that need sources of revenue. Those sources of revenue will be coming in the coming weeks, and we're doing everything we can to get this done as quickly as possible. But obviously, we are introducing new programs in government, and that's why we're working with the public service in order to deliver.
Thank you. We'll now go to the phone for a few questions.
Thank you. Merci. The first question is from Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm wondering what your message is to retirees who are seeing their savings dramatically hit by changes in the market. Is the government looking at, for example, supplementing OAS or GIS, or is there anything that you will be doing for them?
Recognize that the market disruptions are massive, and many Canadians have seen their retirement savings and pensions reduced significantly. We will be taking measures to ease the impact of that. We know that our seniors have worked hard all their lives to be able to retire in comfort, and there is a lot of anxiety there. That's why we will be there for our seniors as well.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Mélanie Marquis de La Presse. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Yesterday, you unveiled an economic support plan. What are the work scenarios you're thinking of? Are we expecting job losses across the country? Do you have any numbers on what you're expecting in that regard? Well, obviously, we're looking at a lot of different scenarios and preparing for these various scenarios. We do hope that it will be as few as possible, and that's why we're trying to counter the spread through these various measures, whether it is by encouraging people to stay at home or encouraging people to work from home or helping people to get new sources of revenue if they cannot work. So we will come through this, we're hoping, with as little impact as possible and as few hospitalizations as possible. Of course, we're prepared for a more severe impact, but we are focused on the idea that we can avoid the worst possible scenario.
Thank you. Merci. And the question is from Hélène Buzetti from Le Devoir. À vous la parole.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. There are a number of people who are stuck abroad and are asking for help to come back home. They left several weeks ago when the pandemic was already underway. And some people are saying perhaps they weren't careful enough. What do you think about this? And do you think we should nevertheless deploy resources to bring them back home? Well, I think what we're doing now is trying to help all Canadians. We're not going to make any judgments with respect to what people have done. We want to help them, and that's why we're working with the airline companies to try and facilitate their return to Canada, wherever they may be, because these are difficult times.
We're focused on bringing Canadians home. We're focused on trying to get our air operators to facilitate more flights to get Canadians home. We recognize that this is a very difficult and exceptional situation, and we're just going to be here for each other. Merci tout le monde.
And that's the Prime Minister of Canada addressing Canadians again for the fourth day in a row from his home, Rideau Cottage, here in the nation's capital, where he is now halfway through his own self-isolation with his family. Let's bring in the host of Power and Politics, Vashi Kapelis, and the CBC's David Cochrane, both here as they have been daily to help us make our way through some of the news that's come from both the Prime Minister and various ministers who will also be speaking shortly. I guess the biggest bit of news, if there was any there, because I really do think today was a message of reassurance, was around